welcome to the Good Stories Podcast. I'm Jody, here again with Steven. To begin, let's get our top 5 new download locations listed off. So this week, Overland Park, Kansas, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Boiling Springs, South Carolina, Chicago, Illinois, and Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you to all those out there listening from new places. It's fun to look each week, and we appreciate you doing it. Today's story is an old one. I think the date is still uncertain, probably always will be, but mine says 14th century. And it is one of the great medieval adventures during the reign of King Arthur. It's called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And it is full of all the stuff I think people love about King Arthur and Camelot and knights errant, including a little bit of magic. It does follow Sir Gawain, one of King Arthur's bravest knights, who steps up to face a mysterious Green Knight, and the crazy challenge he presents them with, seemingly as a test of courage. To me, this one feels partly like a fairy tale, and in part, a moral test, trying to be good and keep your word, even when your life is on the line. So here we go. Time for a story.
King Arthur is celebrating Christmas with his queen and knights at Camelot. Per his custom, he waits for a marvel before the feast can begin. The marvel occurs when a giant green knight on a green horse rides into the hall carrying an enormous axe. The knight challenges anyone there to a beheading contest, stating that he himself would endure the first stroke. Sir Gawain steps forward to meet the challenge, beheading the Green Knight with a single blow. To everyone's amazement, the knight calmly picks up his head, addresses the assembly, and then rides away. Sir Gawain must then seek out the knight at his home, the Green Chapel, in order to fulfill his part of the bargain and endure a single stroke in his own right. It is a perilous journey, not least so when he is warmly welcomed and entertained in a castle near the Green Chapel. Sir Gawain must endure many kinds of temptation and prove whether his actions are worthy of his reputation and the legendary reputation of the Round Table.
Very good. All right. You do so good with those.
Thank you, Jody.
A spoiler alert, this is so old. If you haven't read it before, you probably weren't going to by the time we talk about it.
That's a good point.
But there is a twist ending, and honestly, I had read this before and had completely forgotten the twist ending. It's pretty interesting. And an age recommendation, it's a story about King Arthur and his knights. So there is blood and bloodshed and temptation and love and courage. There's all the things, but it's written like an old poem, so in its way, very clean.
Yeah, I would say so. When you stop to think about some of the things being described, it's a little bit more grown up than one would expect. But again, done in that way that classics are, where usually it goes over your head till you're old enough to understand it anyway.
Yeah, then you look back like, hey.
That's what he was talking about.
That was scandalous. But it is very easy to read and enjoyable. This one, to me, is very detailed. It's kind of like a movie because the scenery is described extensively, but without being too flowery. So again, this had to be translated, not by me, by people who study these things extensively. So I'm sure yours is a little bit different than mine. Is yours more flowery? Mine is very prose.
Mine is the J.R.R. Tolkien translation. And when he did his translation of this, well, let me take a step back. How did we get this book? How did we get this poem? And what was it originally? As you said, somewhere 14th century, around 1400, this is therefore written in Middle English, so contemporary with Chaucer, but a different dialect of Middle English than Chaucer wrote in. Chaucer really, his version of English has kind of evolved into what we speak now. The version of Middle English used in this is a bit harder, a bit denser, and because of that, there are translations of it into modern English. But as Tolkien says, the goal of the translation is to still give you the same flavor. This is a poem written in what is called alliterative verse. Alliteration is that concept of the same consonantal sound happening over and over and over again. And this was such an important part of Anglo-Saxon poetry and then leading on further. And so in his translation of this, Tolkien really tries to keep that going. Just for interest's sake, we actually only know about this particular poem because it survived in a single manuscript. There was a single manuscript that included 4 works, not just Sir Gawain. There was Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, another one called The Pearl, and then 2 other poems, one called Purity and one called Patience. I have read Gawain, I have read The Pearl. Purity and Patience I can't tell you anything about. This, like many older English works, eventually made its way into the Cotton Library. And we've talked about the Cotton Library before when we were talking about Beowulf. This was the great collection of these old works that then got set on fire, and many of them had to be saved from the flames. And this manuscript was saved from the flames. So all that to say, my translation of it is the one that Tolkien wrote, which does have that alliteration and does try and keep the verse structure, and I think he does a great job with it.
Those other books in there, other stories in there, The Pearl and Purity, were they titled, do you know?
No, and I don't think this one was titled either.
That's what I was curious about, because they all started with P's. This one, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, I read that the title just kind of conventionally got agreed upon sometime, I don't know, 1840, 1850, just by academics. But mine, when they're talking about it, they don't know who wrote it. It didn't have a signature, an author, so it's just the Gawain poet.
Correct. It's generally thought that the same guy wrote all 4 works, and there are massive debates in scholarly circles on this, but it is thought that it was an individual genius, and it really is genius. The work of Gawain in particular is so highly structured. There are so many mathematical formulae in it that if you're just reading it, you wouldn't catch it, but scholars have gone in depth on this one, and it is incredible how arranged, orchestrated, detailed this work really is.
Yeah, I find it super interesting. And again, we are not experts. If you know an expert on Gawain, I would love to have them come talk to us, because it is complex. Just the introduction and afterward part of my translation here. But they call it the bob and wheel, the 5-line rhymed tag at the end of each strophe. Because they're not stanzas, they're not the same number of lines. And so there was creativity with it, because it wasn't just formulaic. But this bob and wheel is interesting because you'll have these paragraphs, these strophes that are like a segment of poetry. And then, there's these 5-line kind of summary lines at the end. But apparently that's where that alliteration for the next or the prior segment is established. Really interesting. And the language and characters are so foreign and old to me, because there are examples of that alliteration and they're still not clear to me. Like that has alliteration?
Okay.
But yeah, I bet yours, just because of what I know about Tolkien, would be a lot more flowery in verse. Mine is very much telling the story, and just how the court is described, how the hunt is described, all the details in it. It includes not just the main characters. It's very pervasive. You're looking at this whole scene. So very much like a movie where you get the flavor of the whole thing, and then you kind of zoom in on your main characters. It's really cool telling.
Yeah, I agree. It is so immersive when you read through it. The plot itself is fairly straightforward and could be told much more simply, but this brings you into the action, and it brings you into the flavor and the environment of the age. It's one of those things that we read about when we were doing The Discarded Image by C.S. Lewis, where he was talking about the medieval mind and their love of just description, and also the chief characteristic of dullness that came through. If you really like hunting, there are chapters in this you will love. I don't particularly care for hunting, nor do I care how the deer, the boar, and the fox are skinned, but you're gonna get it in this book.
It's almost a manual, especially about the deer and the hind. You could probably go process one after reading this.
I feel I could after this, yes. But that itself lends a flavor to it. I mean, you get to feel a part of the hunt in the same way you get to feel a part of the court, and he does just such a great job with it. Whoever the he is.
So many people have thought about this book, written about this book or this poem, and they found, perhaps it was in the Cotton Library, I don't know, but there was a book of images, but there's speculation about whether or not the images actually go with it or not, if they were added later on. So I think traditionally they're not included when you get a printed copy of it, a translated copy of it. They're kind of a separate thing just because they don't know.
I would be fascinated to know the answer to that. I know that the manuscript now exists in the British Museum, but I've seen pictures of some of those drawings associated with this. But again, in no version that I've ever bought have they been a part of it. So I would love to see those in more detail. I think there's one other thing I want to bring out that can confuse people. It's simple, it's small, but this drove me nuts the first time I read this. Gawain is the main knight. And I'm going to tell you right now, in my normal not pronouncing things consistently, I am probably going to switch back and forth between Gawain and Gawain. So Gawain and Gawain, I've heard it pronounced both ways, and I have no idea what is right. The other thing that I would say about pronunciation is periodically through this, you will come across a knight named Gawain with a W. It's the same guy. Why is it Gawain and Wawain in one points or others? I'm sure the scholars know, but I do not. But it'll help you to know that that's the same person. I guess there's just one other thing I want to talk about. There's always one other thing, right? Before we launch into this poem. And that's the idea of Gawain himself and a little bit about kind of Arthuriana, the way the Arthurian legend has progressed over time. Arthur was definitely a British king. The story started with him as a British king, and he's always been a British king in the stories. But the stories about him quickly moved to the continent, and so most of the great Arthurian tales we know are French. You have things like Lancelot, right? These great knights that are French. And Lancelot gets mentioned in this story, so it's not that this was done before Lancelot. But in this story, Gawain is absolutely the greatest knight. In so many of the other tales, it's Lancelot, and Gawain actually takes a beating in a lot of the French versions. There is some thought that this was a little bit of a British pushback against the ascendancy of the French version of Arthur to try to reclaim the British version of Arthur with these older characters like Gawain taking the lead. So that's all I have. We can hop into the poem now.
Well, my one more thing. That thing about multiple versions of his name. I should say, mine is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, newly translated and with an introduction by Burton Raffles. Came out in 1970. That's the one I have. And he says, Gawain, Gawain, go on, Gawain. Like, he lists out 10 different versions of the name Gawain. He says, Gawain is Gawain, here and throughout. Why would there be so many different versions, though, in the same poem? Just from a scribe choosing to do so?
Speaking as a non-scholar, I don't know, but part of me thinks it has to do with how many cultures have been involved in it. All these different names go through changes between cultures, so I wonder if there's differences between the Celtic and the Welsh and the Cornwallian, or whatever word to use for that, and the French and all these different ones, if there is variation between them. And I think some of it probably goes down to just the rules of the poetry. When you're dealing with alliteration, the sound of the name is important. And so if you can tweak the name slightly, you could probably fit a rule of the poem that's helpful.
Oh, interesting. In the French tellings about Gawain, is he tend to be like a Don Juan, a womanizer?
He has a complicated relationship with women. Usually the story is told that in one of his first encounters, he has a duel with another knight who he defeats, and then a woman pleads for mercy. Gawain does not show mercy, goes to kill the knight, the woman gets in the way, and he ends up killing the woman. This is a black mark on his honor, and for the rest of his career, he is then supposed to be devoted to women out of kind of penance for that initial action. So that's one of the versions. Other versions, he's just mean towards women. He's just not very good towards them. And so within this book, Gawain is a pinnacle of virtue. He is a good man. In most of the stories, he is a great knight, but in matters of virtue, he is often a foil to other characters like Lancelot.
Okay, to Troy.
To Troy. And I wonder if a good way to start this isn't just to read this first strophe, this first part, because you'll get a flavor of the alliteration. This is a poem that really should be read out loud because you'll hear that alliteration. I'm just going to go ahead and read this. Is that okay?
Yep, go for it.
When the siege and the assault had ceased at Troy, and the fortress fell in flame to firebrands and ashes, the traitor who was contrivance of treason there, fashioned was tried for his treachery, the most true upon earth. It was Aeneas the noble and his renowned kindred, who then laid under them lands and lords became of well nigh all the wealth in the western isles. When royal Romulus to Rome his road had taken, in great pomp and pride he peopled it first, and named it with his own name. And yet now it bears, Tyrius went to Tuscany and towns founded, Longobarda and Lombardy uplifted halls, and far over the French flood Felix Brutus, on many a broad bank and brae, Britain established full fair, where strange things, strife and sadness, at whiles in the land did fare, and each other grief and gladness oft fast have followed there. So there's definitely this flow of the poetry in it, and you can hear those repeated sounds over and over again in each line. And the fortress fell in flame to firebrands and ashes. And each line has its own hook that it really hits on in terms of the sound. And you can imagine what an interesting thing this would be to listen to. I mean, this great work with like 101 of these passages that you would go through over time.
And I think it's a really cool beginning in terms of setting the place and time in history. He's talking about Troy and Rome and all the way down through Brutus and Britain being established, and then King Arthur. It places the story so well, and kind of the grandeur and the history of the time and place as well.
Mm-hmm. And going back to our description of this being a very well arranged and almost mathematical book, this starts with Troy. And actually, when we get to the ending, it ends with Troy, too. And so it's almost like these nesting boxes where it's so organized, kind of going in and out.
To me, it was very circular. At the end, there's mentions of Hector and all these things from old battles. And here we are at the time of King Arthur. Again, our translations are very different, but it's the same story. So I think this is a really interesting line, because we're talking about being in noble Brutus's Britain, in battle bold knights who loved to fight and fought and often brought pain to their people, far more than in any land of the world. And it says, pain for their people, but wonderful things happened in England. Such wonderful things, strange adventures and tales of Arthur and his knights. So I'm kind of rolling a bunch of these things together because it's just beautiful to read the whole thing, though. I don't think we should, but
I want to.
Highly recommend picking it up. You'll see what I mean. And this they call a surpassingly strange tale.
I agree. But how great is it that we are seeing Arthur here in court? And this is Arthur at his peak. This is where his knights all have done noble deeds and are still doing noble deeds. They've got a reputation. The Round Table is known far and wide, and Arthur is known far and wide. But this is before he gets old. This is before the weakness falls into the court. This is peak Camelot. And not only that, it's a party. This is the Christmas tide. This is the festival and the party and the joy of Christmas. And remember, Christmastide at this time goes for 12 days. So this initial thing that happens actually happens on New Year's Day, the great feast of New Year's, but that's still the Christmas season. And that joy and pomp and the delight of this really features strongly in the setup.
Mine actually uses the word reveling.
Yes. Very
appropriate. And mine emphasizes the youth of it, and that even here at Christmas time, they call it the spring of Camelot, because it's in that age of renewal and energy and fame. This court and the knights there are all very famous. But here's one of those really detailed pictures because it describes all the courtiers, the ladies, the food, the presents, and ladies laughing, and says, while ladies laughed when kisses were lost, and whoever won them found it hard to weep. There's a lot of courtly kissing in this between people and just joy and merriment. And it describes even things on the walls, the table. I mean, it's very beautiful. Guinevere's there, seated in the midst, fringed with silk. And even down to the carpets. Mine says velvet carpets, embroidered rugs, studded with jewels, as rich as an emperor's ransom. I mean, this is opulence.
Mm-hmm.
But Arthur, young, powerful Arthur, cannot sit down. He cannot eat until he sees or is told a tale of just epic awesomeness.
This is so great and is classic in Arthurian literature. At these great feasts, these high feasts, well, I'll just read it. And another rule, moreover, was his reason besides, that in pride he had appointed it. It pleased him not to eat upon festival so fair, ere he first were apprised of some strange story, or stirring adventure, or some moving marvel that he might believe in of noble men, knighthood, or new adventures, or a challenge should come, a champion seeking to join with him in jousting, in jeopardy to set his life against life. How great is that? Part of me, when I first learned of this, I had heard it that he wouldn't eat until some great adventure came. But then I thought, man, he must never get to eat because that can't happen at every one of these festivals. But even a story is enough. I mean, it's better if somebody comes in, if there's a challenge or the beginning of a quest, but even stories of knightly deeds, and then he can eat.
So the fearless king stood in front of his table, talking of elegant trifles, and Gawain the Good sat beside Guinevere. And it goes on about others of the knights, faithful knights, and the bishops there. But curious what you think about this, brother, because, again, I read a bunch of things, and some people think it depends how you read it, how you think of Arthur. Some people think they're making fun of him, just his ego, that he can't even eat until he has this epic adventure. And I didn't get it that way. And yet I could kind of see it if you're testing the mettle of the court, the mettle of Arthur and his knights, that kind of idea that here at this point, they have all these riches and all these opportunities, but we haven't seen them do anything cool.
I have never taken it that way. A part of it, maybe that says more about me, that I'm just not a cynic. So when this tells me that Arthur is awesome, I just believe that Arthur is awesome. I think that's the goal here, is to highlight how great this court is. And so I've never taken it in that cynical way. I could see how somebody could, but you can be cynical about anything. But I think the story carries better if Arthur truly is great, if Gawain truly is great, which is the way I've always read it.
What does yours call him? Mine says in line like 208 or so, Gawain the Good.
So mine says, their good Gawain was set at Guinevere's side.
Gawain the Good. I like that. Just as a thing. You know, in Narnia, when Peter and Edmund and Susan and Lucy are crowned, they're each given a title and epithet. Mm-hmm. Gawain the Good.
Yeah.
What an excellent one.
And it fits with the alliteration goal.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great description for him as this poem progresses. Arthur's there, Gawain's there, Guinevere's there, all these other knights are there, and they are waiting for a marvel, and they are not disappointed.
Talks about how the food comes, the first dish is set in place when a ghastly knight sprang through the door. Huge, taller than men stand, so square and thick from neck to knee, thighs so broad around, legs so long he seemed half an ogre, a giant. Clearly the biggest creature in the world.
And there are pages and pages of description of this man. Again, it's just the descriptions are opulent and lush and rich. But what you have is this man, but a giant. And he is green. And he's not walking into this court. He rides a horse into this court. And the horse is green and glowing, and all his armor is green and glowing, and this axe of monstrous size is green, and everything is green. But there's a couple things that are important to note here. One, he is wearing no helm. He is not wearing a helmet. He is not fully armored. He is also not carrying a sword or a spear. He is not carrying the tools of knighthood. He is carrying a giant axe and a sprig of holly.
He comes in peace. Kind of.
Kind of. It's more that he's not come for war. He's not outfitted to a degree that he could joust, because he doesn't have the helm, doesn't have the sword, doesn't have the lance. So this is not a challenge in that way. This is not a tournament. This is a different form of game he's playing, a different form of challenge that is kind of outside the normal rules of knighthood and errantry.
And through the text, you get the sense that everyone there is looking at this man, this giant green man, and measuring him up. These are knights. They are called upon to fight. And so they're assessing danger or peace. What is this? And Arthur is standing. He can't sit yet anyway, so he was standing when the guy came in.
And he's courteous.
Mhm.
He speaks to him courteously. The guy is not courteous in response. I mean, he's looking around saying, who is Arthur? It should be obvious who Arthur is. He's the king. But this guy is acting as if it's beneath him. So which of these little people is Arthur? And Arthur even uses lines like, you're welcome if you love me. And he just goes right over that. He is not there for love. So we've already talked about that he's not there for warfare. You know, he's not dressed for it. He's not ready for it. This is not a challenge in that way, but it's definitely condescending, and he is definitely there for a purpose. And it's at this point that he issues his challenge. If any so hardy in this house here holds that he is, if so bold be his blood or his brain be so wild, that he stoutly dare strike one stroke for another, then I will give him as my gift this geese-arm costly, this axe. 'Tis heavy enough to handle as he pleases, and I will abide the first brunt, here, bare as I sit. If any fellow be so fierce as my faith to test, hither let him haste to me and lay hold of this weapon. I hand it over forever, he can have it as his own, and I will stand a stroke from him, stock still on the floor, provided thou lay down this law, that I may deliver him another. Claim I, and yet a respite I'll allow, till a year and a day go by. Come quick, and let's see now, if any here dare reply. So to translate, this guy walks in, says, I have this giant axe. Any one of you can use it to cut off my head, to take a stroke at me. I won't move, I won't pause, I won't fight back. I will allow you to take whatever stroke at me you want with this axe, so long as you agree to let me do the same with whatever weapon I choose to you in a year and a day. This is a weird challenge.
I agree. I still think it's weird. And I know how it ends. And everyone is stunned. Even Arthur. It's a weird challenge. They sat there stunned, and it says the knight swivels in his saddle, and it's funny, all the rest of him is green, but his eyes rolling fierce and red, they look around, and he laughs at them. He laughs down at them with contempt. Mm-hmm. He says, is this Arthur's house hailed across the world, that fabled court? Where have your conquests gone to, and your pride? Where is your anger and those awesome boasts? He's mocking the round table. Mm-hmm. Arthur gets fired up.
Oh, yeah, he's not going to stand for that, because this is Arthur at his most awesome.
His fair face flooded, hot with shame, and his cheeks. He flared as angry as wind, and all his people burned. He yells at the knight, the Green Knight, and he says, you've asked for folly, and folly you'll get. No one's afraid of your nonsense. For God's sake, give me your axe. I'll grant your request. The king, King Arthur, is willing to do this.
Yes. And can we just talk about the request a little bit more? I have said over and over that Arthur reigns on the borders of fairyland, and this is part of why I say it, because a guy like this great green hulking monster can just ride into the hall and make this weird challenge. It makes sense that everybody is silent, and there's different ways of reading this. So one of the ways to read this is that everyone thinks he's just crazy, right? And they're not going to take the challenge, because why would you engage with a crazy man? Because once they kill him, he's dead. And in some ways, it would be a blight on their honor to engage with a lunatic who's just suicidal. So that's one way to think about it. The other way this can be read, though, is, again, we're on the borders of fairyland. If somebody comes in and says, I want you to do this crazy thing, clearly there's some magic involved here. He wouldn't do this if he didn't have a trick up his sleeve. So why would you engage with that as well? So there are very good reasons for the knights to not step forward, and even for Arthur to not step forward. But their honor has been challenged. Their courage has been challenged. And Arthur will not stand for that. And so it's one of the fun parts about this book, is you can spend a long time just thinking about the individual plot points and what the people must have been thinking and how they interacted and why did they react in the way they did.
So, why is he green?
Yeah, this is another one that I don't know the answer to, but boy, it's fun to think about. We have done another story with a green man. When we did Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, that ends with the green man. And in that story, the green man is this sentient walking plant, almost an ent. He's made up of leaves and flowers and branches and trees. And there is much in Celtic history that has this concept of a green man. There's even still a lot of kind of garden artwork you can get with this sort of half-plant person man, a green man that you just put in your garden and is somehow tied to the soil. And so going back to what I was saying earlier about how this green knight in many ways isn't really a knight. I mean, he doesn't have a sword. He's not set up the way a knight would be set up. He's something else. It's something tied to the land, something older, something rich with symbolism and magic and life in some ways. I mean, you talked about the fact that he's green, but his eyes are red. What is he carrying? He's carrying a sprig of holly, which is green with little red berries. So there seems to be this tie to the natural world, but more than that, to the magical world, and even more than that, to fairy. Fairy in its high and perilous and beautiful and dangerous sense. So there's something coming into the civilized court here that isn't civilized, that is older, that is deeper, and has a power that they don't fully understand and isn't fully conquered.
Interesting you went to the Green Man from Eye of the World. I thought of another story we did too, A Christmas Carol. This guy reminds me of Christmas Present. But Christmas Present, he's got the green robe and it's trimmed in ermine. So does the Green Knight. And yes, carrying a sprig of holly, a lot of it about Christmas Present. And clearly these stories are separated by many centuries, actually. But there's something very present and visceral about the Green Knight and about what he's testing. I feel like the whole thing's a big old test.
Yeah. I think Arthur agrees with you. And this is why he steps up and is willing to, he leads. He's the first knight, right? He's the king. And his honor has been challenged. The honor of his knight has been challenged. So he's going to step up. But you can't have the king do this. This is a dangerous thing and a silly thing for the king to do. And so this is the first instance where we see the bravery, the courage, and the goodness of Sir Gawain.
Mine says, Gawain was seated near the queen. He leaned forward. Hear me, my lord. Let this challenge be mine. Gawain bows to the king and says, release me, my liege, from this bench. Let me come to you. Permit me to rise without discourtesy and without displeasing your queen. He can't just walk away from a lady.
Yeah. That wouldn't be courteous. And courtesy, the life of the court, the speech of the court, is so important in this poem.
So I think courtesy is not a word we often use now, but when I think of courtesy, it has kind of an older flavor, very aristocracy, fine manners and fine behaviors. But if it doesn't have the heart behind it, it's pretty empty. And here it's about the heart behind it, the testing of the mettle and the courage and the love behind Gawain's courtesy.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up and worded that in that way, because I love the word courtesy. Because to me, it is tied to the idea of the court. But the court as it should be. And Arthur's court is the court as it should be, at least until it falls. And so, yes, it's the real courtesy. It's the idea of being a part of something that makes you better. That your actions, your words, your thoughts, your loves, everything are higher because you're brought into this world that is higher than what you are. And so this concept that you would have courtesy because it would now be beneath you to act in any way other than on this higher good level, I think is beautiful. There are lines throughout Narnia where when C.S. Lewis is writing in this kind of old English style where he talks about, Paradan, of your courtesy, pass me the wine. Like, I just love that idea of your courtesy. It's the idea it's something, it's not only the way you act, but it's something you own. It's a part of you, that you have this court life within you, and that then it manifests itself in your interactions with everyone around you. For those that you are friends with, for those you're enemies with, for those that are above you in the social chain, and for those that are below you in the social chain, that there's this guide, this courtly guide. And you're right, if it's a bad court, that could be a horrible thing, because it can cause horribleness. But the whole conceit of the Arthurian legend is that this is the way court is meant to be, and Gawain is a master of courtesy.
Well, and it matters because none of these other knights stand up. Get the sense the room is full of what we think of as brave knights. And Gawain says, basically that he is the least of them all, the least of them all. My life the least, my death no loss. All my virtue is through you, my royal uncle. And he's like, this foolish business fits my station, not yours. Let me play this green man's game. It wouldn't be okay, though. Arthur couldn't hand him this role if he didn't practice the right courtly courtesy. If he stood up, turned his back on Guinevere, like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
That's too much. You still have to play the game.
Yes.
Because this is court. Even when this crazy Green Knight comes in, he still has to play the game. There is still honors to uphold.
And in some ways, playing the game is the unofficial theme of this entire work, because there are games within games within games. And you're right, he has to play the game that the Green Man is proposing, but he's still also playing the game of court etiquette. A great point. Great point.
It says, the knights whispered, buzzed, then all in a voice said it was for Gawain. The king should halt. Be like, he is the guy.
Yeah, him. Let him do it.
It says, Arthur ordered his knights to rise, and he commends Gawain. He commends him to Christ, and he hands him the axe.
And I love the interchanges here. And I'm not reading them all because we're trying not to read the whole book and they take a long time. But even his interactions now with the Green Knight are very courtly, where he says, all right, let's make sure we got the rules right. They go over the wager one more time. Here's what we're going to do. And then Gawain, for his part of it, says, and how will I find you in a year and a day? How will I know where to go? And the Green Knight says, take your stroke and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, it's funny. The king actually recommends to Gawain to strike but once, offer only exactly what he asks. Because if you do anything different than the terms, you're the loser.
Mm-hmm.
The deal is up. You lose the game.
Yeah, you're not playing the game right.
So I always ask you the hard questions. Why doesn't the Green Knight have a name? The knight asks Gawain, what's your name? Gawain doesn't ask him back. Not here.
I think there's probably several possible answers to that. I'm thinking out loud here, so I wouldn't stand by these permanently, but here are my initial thoughts. 1, he is not coming in the form of a knight. He does not have a sword. He does not have a spear. He does not announce himself as a knight should, as Gawain would. So this is not a tournament with another knight. This is not a challenge in that way. And so his name, he almost forfeits it because he doesn't give it and doesn't offer it. Gawain is not interacting with an equal here. He is interacting with somebody of a different social status, which from Gawain's point of view would be a lower social status. But from the Green Knight's point of view, he views himself as a higher social status. So I think that's part of it. This is not knight against knight. This is knight against elemental force. The other reason is exactly that whole elemental force concept. So I think the Green Knight in his presentation and his personages and who he is not just a knight seeking glory or going to challenge Arthur. He's almost this representation of deeper, fuller, bigger things. He's in some way nature personified. And how can you give that a name? And then the other answer to this is one that I don't think I'm going to give right now because it would give away the end of the poem. Because we actually do know this man has a name, but we don't learn it for a long, long time.
It's true, but the knight in mine says, take my good axe and show me a chop.
And that is another thing. For those of us who love knights and knightly tales, this is part of what we love about it. Because it's this strange mix of this high courtesy and refinement and nice clothes and fine food and, gentle manners of speech associated with, here's an axe, chop the guy's head off. I mean, there's this extreme violence on the other end of the pole, and a true knight of Arthur's court has to be both. He has to be meek in court and savage in battle. And it's this mixture of the two, which is so intriguing and interesting to read through. And so Gawain is doing all the knightly conversation. He's doing all the courteous discussion. They've got this whole thing lined out, but then it's time for him to take a swing. And Gawain is awesome in every way, including his strength, his ability to strike where he wants to strike. And so when he goes to take the swing, he is the greatest knight of Arthur's court doing it, and he's not going to miss, and he doesn't.
It describes in great detail the axe going through this guy's neck, and the head goes rolling. And there is some humor in this where the knights like kick it around because it's rolling by their feet.
Like a soccer ball.
Again, green and red. This green head goes rolling, but the blood's spurting. But like you said, this guy had a trick up his sleeve. There's some magic and fairy here. This headless man, huge knight, picks up his green head, mounts his horse, and his head keeps talking.
Yeah. He's pointing the head. He's grabbing it by the hair and pointing it to who he wants to talk to and says, you've had your turn. Now it's mine, basically. Year and a day. Come find me at the Green Chapel. But again, Gawain doesn't know where this is. And he's asking, where do I go? And the knight basically says, don't worry. If you look for it, you'll find it.
Yeah, lots of people have heard of it.
Yeah, I'm kind of a big deal.
Truly. And then he rides away with his head in his hand. So crazy. And all the other knights, it says they're afraid. Gawain and Arthur laugh.
Yeah, what happens next is wonderful because not only are there the knights that are afraid, but there are ladies present. The queen, not least of all, and this is a horrible thing to witness. But yeah, this line, meanwhile, the king and Sir Gawain at the green man laugh and smile. Yet to men had appeared 'twas plain, a marvel beyond any denial. And Arthur talks it down. He says, dear lady, today be not downcast at all. Such cunning play well becomes the Christmas tide. I mean, to him, this was the marvel he was looking for. And you see, I think here, the way Arthur can run his court and can protect people. So this thing that could turn the whole festival into a thing of sadness and terror, he and Gawain laugh. And they ease the tensions and they ease the fears of those around them. And now, good news, they can start the feast because a marvel has occurred.
Yeah, Arthur can sit down and eat.
Finally.
But I think it's interesting that it's only the two of them specifically who laugh. They're the two who stood up. They're the two who did something. And the others, it doesn't comment on them. Theirs is a essence of fear still and this kind of terror of this. Like mine says a miracle, but this kind of dark miracle where this headless knight just rode away. Fine. But Arthur and Gawain laugh. I love that part.
Yeah, it certainly sets them up as the greatest in the court.
And he gets to keep the axe as promised. So the Green Knight has done his part. He did not flinch. He did not back away. He allowed a chop to be given. And the axe has been left with Gawain.
And it was a mighty chop, a mighty stroke. The axe gets put up so everyone can tell the story and look at it over the next year. And then the year proceeds. And this brings us to the end of book 1. There are 4 books within this story, and that is the end of book 1. That is the beheading contest. While we're talking about beheading, one of the things we haven't talked about yet is the role of that in Celtic literature and history. Beheading is a really big deal. When you read through things like the Mabinogion, there's things like the head of Bran the Blessed and things like that, where a decapitated head is actually put in a certain place to actually be protective to the area, or to the country, or to the nation. When you read through Caesar's talk against the Gauls, right? So the Gauls were Celts. Again, beheading was a big part of that. And so the Green Man just keeps getting more interesting and keeps getting older, because I do think there are all these ties to ancient Celtic and pagan lore that just form a part of the background to the story.
And for Gawain to just chop off a guy's head who he doesn't know, just out of nowhere, like he kneels and chops his head off. That's hard to do. I mean, I've not been tried, but a guy once told me to slap him, just being stupid. I couldn't do it. It just seems so wrong. So to just out of nowhere stop eating your dinner and slice off a guy's head, that would take some, I don't even know what the right word is, something.
Yeah. Is that admirable? Not in our society.
No, but in this case, like that's what was called for. Very interesting. And I just think it would be so hard to do in front of this room of people, because the knight didn't do anything physical, anything violent to them. He just showed up and said, I'll see you in a year. Yeah. Really odd. Just a really odd feeling interaction. Please chop off my head. I don't know. We can move on.
Yeah. You can imagine why there was a pause in the hall
before
anyone stepped forward.
Oh my. Anyway, it says in part 2, a year runs fast and always runs different. And the poetry about the passing of the year is very good. He goes through the seasons as they go along.
It's beautiful. It is really the lusciousness of this poetry struck me on this read through. How just beautiful it is to sit and read through this and to vision the year kind of swirling on and moving away. Just so good. Recommend you read it.
And then he stays with Arthur till All Saints' Day, and then there's a feast. They have this great party for Gawain, expecting him to leave to his death because his head doesn't reattach. He can't carry his head around, and he has taken this oath that he's going to get a chop just like he gave. But they have this merry party. It says everyone's hearts are sad, but they're trying to make the most of it for him to enjoy their time together.
Yeah. And timing on this is important, so I do want to just remind us where we're at in the year. The initial beheading happened on New Year's Day, so he's got a year and a day. So basically New Year's of the next year, he has to be at the Green Chapel. The year has sped by, and then this is All Saints' Day or All Hallows' Day, which is November 1st. So this is the day after All Hallows' Eve or Halloween. So November 1st is when he's going to set out. So that means he's got the months of November and December to find this Green Chapel.
And if you think about this year passing, what is Gawain thinking about? That's actually not even in here until the end of this party. And at the end of it, he says, should I waste my time with fear? Whether pleasant or wild, fate must be put to the test. He said he was willing to die. Now he gets to test whether that's true or not. But he is leaving. He does prep to leave. But this whole year, he is waiting for the date of his death.
And there's this strange added stress on him. He doesn't know where the Green Chapel is. He doesn't know where to look, how long it's going to take. But he is honor bound to seek it and to find it. So not only does he carry, well, a man like me would be afraid. Gawain is never afraid. But not only does he carry the fear of this, best case scenario, I show up and I get my head cut off, but he also has to carry this fear of not being able to find it and then being in breach of his pledge, which to a man like Gawain is just as bad or worse than actually dying in the attempt. So this is all on him as he approaches this All Hallows feast and he gets ready to depart.
It describes all of his decor and armor and the opulence of it and the embroidery behind it and his horse, Gringolet.
Yes! Yes! I looked that up to try if I could figure out what that meant. And there's debate, but they think it's likely Welsh in origin, which would make sense given Gawain's roots. And it means either white or handsome and hardy. So his horse, handsome and hardy. Fantastic.
Gringolet. I mean, isn't that like Lord of the Rings, where even the great horses have names? Yes. Very good. And lastly, Gawain carries his shield. And this is interesting. It has a pentagonal star painted pure gold, and it gives a history of the star, created by Solomon.
I love this part. You can just geek out on this, because he goes into depth on this symbol. And the first thing I'll say is how interesting is it that he spends line after line after line talking about the shield and like one line talking about the sword. That he puts a sword, yeah, he's got one, but it's the shield that he describes in such rich detail and complexity. And there's two components to the shield that are worth talking about and thinking about. There's two sides to it, and on one, as you said, is the pentacle, and I'll go into that in detail, but the other side is the Blessed Virgin. So you have the picture of the Virgin Mary, which by looking at it restores his faith and his courage. So whenever he's in fear, he has this religious icon that he can gaze upon. And so we see where some of Gawain's strength and goodness comes from, because piety is deeply in him. With that, let's talk about the pentacle. So the pentacle is a 5-pointed star. And I remember as a kid being taught how to draw a star on a piece of paper. And the 5-pointed star is one that you never have to pick up your pen as you're doing it. You can go through all the motions and you start at one point and end at that point, and then you get this interconnected structure with 5 points. This is the pentacle, or what's called the endless knot, because it is endless. So it's a symbol of eternity, but eternity with these points embedded in it. A lot of people really only know the five-pointed star or the pentangle in its darker forms when it's done upside down and is an occult symbol, but that's not the way it's being used here. The other thing, when Tolkien comments on this story, he points out that, yeah, you can look for this in history, but it doesn't really matter what it was used at in history, because the Gawain author has very explicit description of what this is and what it means. So this pentangle, 5 points, and it helps describe basically 5 sets of virtues or 5 sets of qualities that Gawain has in perfection. The first one is that he is faultless in his 5 senses, right? Taste, touch, smell, all those kinds of things. He is faultless in them. So physically, he is a specimen. Carried out by the second of the 5 sets of virtues, his 5 fingers never failed. So these are his hands, his 5 fingers. So not only are his senses perfect, but his deeds are perfect. The way his hand works is absolutely perfect. But then it goes into the more religious themes. Faith in the 5 wounds of Christ. Christ, of course, classically had the 5 wounds. He had a hole in each hand, a hole in each foot, and then where the spear pierced his side. These are the 5 wounds of Christ that are a big part of kind of contemplation, especially in the monastic world at this time. And these 5 wounds are a remembrance based off this pentangle that he looks upon on his shield and his armor. And then you have the 5 joys of Mary. I had to do some looking up onto this because with Mary, frequently you hear talked about her wounds or her swords and her joys. Classically now they usually talk about the 7 joys of Mary. I don't know which 5 specifically this author was referring to, but the 7 are the Annunciation, the Visitation where she goes to see her cousin Elizabeth, the Nativity, the birth of Christ, the Adoration of the Magi, the finding of Jesus in the temple, the resurrection of our Lord, and then the Assumption and coronation of Mary. So which are the 5 he's referring to? I don't know. Take 2 of them out and you've got the 5. So that is the 4th set of virtues. And then we finally have the 5th set of 5s. And these are characteristics that mark Gawain as the great man that he is. They are, in my translation, listed as free giving, friendliness, chastity, chivalry, and piety. And so this set of 5s is the 5th 5 of the pentangle. And I have no doubt there have been books and articles and essays and all sorts of things written on this. I've never read any of them, but I can see why you would, because there's just so much symbolism and meaning in Gawain's shield and the pentangle.
Mine says, and all these 5s met in one man, joined to each other, each without end, set in perfect points. And so he is armed with the emblem of all these things and all of them embodied inside of himself, but he has to go prove it.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets on Gringolet.
Go Gringolet!
Wishes goodbye to the courts and heads out. And I love how it summarizes all of his adventures we don't hear about.
Yeah, but these are worth thinking about because he's killing dragons. There's bears and lions. There's journeys and magic. He packs a lot into these 2 months he's traveling. And this was all in addition to the fact that he knows the end of the road if he could even find the Green Chapel. So this is a perilous and dangerous adventure where most of it we just get blown over because we just know Gawain's up to the task. So he handles all this.
It says he found himself facing enemies so foul and wild that they forced him to fight for his life. He met so many marvels in those hills, it is difficult to tell a tenth of it. Dragons attacked him, sometimes wolves and satyrs and forest trolls running out of rocks, and bulls and bears and ivory-tusked boars and giant ogres leaping from crags. But he was strong and courageous, and he made it. Made it through.
He's got all that.
It sums that up in like 4 lines.
Yeah. Like, wow, those have to be some good stories.
But finally he gets really cold and he's running out of time and he prays. He prays to Mary. He prays to Christ. And he gets this vision. This castle opens up in front of him. And he's so grateful for the peace, the opportunity to ask for directions and actually find his way. It's funny. His sadness at missing Mass on Christmas is actually called out.
Yeah.
He prays that he can actually find a place where he can hear the Mass read. And then he's granted access to this castle. And it is nothing but inviting and courtly.
Mm-hmm.
Soon as he walks in, he says, "Please ask your lord if I can come in." And they're like, "We already know. You can come."
Yeah, he'll say yes. When he sees the castle, he gives thanks. He gave thanks to Jesus and to Saint Julian.
You said it's not the Julian I know.
No, so devotees of the show will know that I love Julian of Norwich, my favorite 15th century mystic. She's wonderful and delightful, but that is not the Saint Julian being referred to here, because Julian is not actually a saint, as far as I know in the Catholic tradition. This is referring to Saint Julian the Hospitaller. So he is the patron saint of hospitality and wayfarers seeking lodging. So it's appropriate for Gawain to be thankful to him. The stories behind Julian are frankly kind of disturbing. I know of two versions of it. One version of it is that at one point he thought he saw somebody in his bed cheating on him with his wife. And so he killed them both and then realized, oh, no, that's not it. And so he then devoted his life to basically taking care of strangers and giving them a place to come sleep and not killing them in bed.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that's one version of it. And then there's another version that says that at one point the devil came and he gave him hospitality and then regretted it and swore he would give hospitality to no one ever after. But then Jesus came and he turned away Jesus. And when he realized what he'd done, he realized, no, I have to give hospitality to everyone else. So there's lots of stories about St. Julian, but the theme or the overarching thing is he dedicated at least the end of his life towards the hospitality and the care of strangers.
Interesting that it's through a mistake, though.
But every version I've heard of him is through a mistake, and a pretty tragic one.
Yeah, so interesting foreshadowing, I would think, with that, if you know the story of Julian. But the reception that Gawain receives here is just wonderful. It is rich. They are super hospitable. Mine says, "Everything here is yours. Use it as you please. Accept it as your own for as long as you like." And this is before they even know his name.
Yeah, because once they learn his name, they get excited. Because the Round Table is legendary. And the courtesy, the manners, the reputation of the Round Table is just the greatest anywhere. And amongst the Knights of the Round Table, Gawain is known to be the highest example. And so they are stoked. And I'll just read this. These are the kind of the people in the castle talking to each other in excitement. "Now, fairly shall we mark the fine points of manners and the perfect expressions of polished converse. How speech is well spent will be expounded unasked, since we have found here this fine father of breeding. God has given us of his goodness, his grace now indeed, who such a guest as Gawain has granted us to have. When blissful men at board for his birth sing blithe at heart, what manners high may mean, this knight will now impart. Who hears him will, I ween, of love speech learn some art." And so they are so excited. I mean, this is courtly life. And this guy knows how to do court life. It's like, you know, a Major League Baseball player coming and training with a minor league team. They're going to learn something from him, and they're most excited because he is renowned with his love speech, his ability to engage in this witty banter, this back and forth of courtly love.
There are ladies at this court, and there's a pair of them. And I think this is interesting because there's one that, to Gawain's eyes, she's even more beautiful than Guinevere. Like, nobody's more beautiful than Guinevere. This lady is. But she's paired with this old woman and talks about her wrinkled jowls. And they're always together in court. And he's between, they kind of appropriate him, one on either side of him. But he's so good at entertaining and playing the verbal game back and forth. The lord of this castle is just taken with Gawain. He is just everything he thought he'd be. And they make a deal.
They do. We've seen how well deals work out so far, so let's see if this one is similar. It's not. This is a very different firm. So this is the master of the castle speaking. "One thing more," said the master, "we'll make an agreement. Whatever I win in the wood at once shall be yours, and whatever gain you may get, you shall give in exchange. Shall we swap thus, sweet man? Come, say what you think. Whether one's luck be light or one's lot be better?" So the deal here is Gawain is going to hang out at the palace, the castle, the mansion, and that's it. That's all that's expected of him, is he's just going to hang out indoors resting. Whereas the lord of the castle is going to go out hunting each day. And then whatever the lord gets is going to be Gawain's, and whatever Gawain gets sitting around the castle doing nothing is going to be the lord's. This seems like a weird deal.
It made me very uncomfortable. It's like, you stay here with my wife.
That's right.
Stay, sleep, don't go anywhere. And Gawain's like, no, I need to find this green chapel. And the Lord's like, no problem. I know where it is.
2 miles. It is 2 miles away.
You're almost there. So don't even go today. Don't go tomorrow. Go on New Year's Day. You'll be there in time. I promise. Stay here and rest with my wife.
Yeah. And the timing on that is very important because remember, he left November 1st. He is now at the end of December, but he has 3 days that he can now spend in this castle. And on the 4th day, he can leave in the morning and be there within just, a short time. Really an uncomfortable offer. And this is what brings us to the end of book 2 and into book 3. And I will say book 3 is proportionally by far the largest of the 4 books. And so what's going to happen in this book, in a lot of ways, is kind of the meat of the poem.
And yet it's probably the part I enjoyed the least because there's so much detail in it. Like you said earlier, I don't need to know every detail about processing a deer.
I do think, though, that this book 3 is the most medieval of the 4 books. I think this is the one that the earlier listeners of this probably would have loved the most because it speaks to something that isn't part of our society and it's not part of our kind of moral code or worldview. This is the book on courtly love. And courtly love is not something that really has worn well over the centuries. The whole idea of wooing somebody who's married to somebody else is not something that we look on admirably.
No, I don't.
Deservedly so.
Like, at all, actually.
But if anybody really wants to understand kind of why this is loved the way it was loved and why this whole concept of courtly love made a big resurgence isn't the wrong word, why it became such a big thing, I would turn you to the great C.S. Lewis work, The Allegory of Love. It was his first great work, and he talks through how they got to this and where it came from. And it does make its own sense, and especially in this setting. Because remember, one of the things the medievals loved doing was bringing together contrasts, bringing together and uniting things that were entirely different. You wouldn't think you could unite them. Well, they kind of can here. And there was this concept of love is really truly love when it's unattainable. Marriage, they knew well. And remember, at this point, women are basically property. And so marriage, it was very hard to find love within it for both men and for women because it was more of a business deal than anything else. And so artistically and in literature, they kind of reached out to the world of these extramarital affairs in order to actually find love because marriage wasn't just doing it for them. But remember, this is also a Christian world, and we know that's not okay. So how can you make that safe? Well, on some level, you can make it safe by making the object of the love unattainable. So if you have the lord of the castle and his married wife as the object of the love, somebody with the honor and nobility of Gawain is never going to act on that. This is the theory. He's never going to act on that. But what that means is you are then free to play these games, dangerous games, but these games where courtly love can be displayed and yet Gawain can still keep his chastity. So it's complicated and it's weird, and you've got to read a lot of medieval literature, I think, to really fully appreciate it. So it makes sense that for a lot of people, this isn't their favorite part. But I hope that gives a glimpse of why, for the people who first heard this, this may have been their favorite part.
I think it's admirably put together because it's this side-by-side in poetry where we see the leader of the castle and he's up out early with his huntsmen and there's these baying dogs and they're going after deer. They're going after hind and they get a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And they're excited. It's that thrill of the hunt, but it's in parallel where it says, so the Lord plays at the edge of the wood and Gawain lies in a lovely bed.
Yeah.
Okay, it's this parallel between the The leader of the castle, like out hunting, acting, doing that which is called of an active man. But Gawain, too, he has been traveling. He's been on his way. He is tired, and he's going potentially to face his death. I don't know. Did the Lord know that here?
Yes. Yes, because when Gawain asked about the chapel, he explained the bet, basically the challenge that he's sworn to undertake.
But here, too, Gawain is called on to act like a man. He is, like I said, this whole thing reminds me of just a test of mettle, test of what you say you believe. And so he's lying in bed, asleep, and he hears someone come in and bolt the door. And it's the lady of the castle. It's the man's wife. And it's funny, at first he just pretends to be asleep, like, what is she here for?
That doesn't work for long, though.
But like we talked about courtesy earlier, this is also chastity. Chastity, virtue, purity. All these things have been assigned to Gawain in name. But here, this young man, who I'm sure hot-blooded, well, he has to prove himself able to control himself by this woman just throwing herself at him.
Yeah, in no uncertain terms. And so that balance of how does he maintain his chastity, maintain her chastity to her husband, but still be courtly to her and not insult her?
Mm-hmm.
How can he play this game of banter where she is not insulted, but where he is able to keep his chastity? And like you say, it's really well done. There are 3 days of this, and this takes pages and pages and pages, but I think we can go through it fairly quick. And that parallel you described is so good. So the first day, the lord of the castle is hunting the deer. And in many ways, the lady's behavior on the first day is very similar to a deer, a fairly brazen deer, but she's kind of timid, right? She's not forceful. Her mannerisms kind of parallel what the Lord is hunting. And after their conversation, which again is really well done, the compromise is a kiss. And so the lady gives Gawain a kiss and he gives her one back. So he has received a kiss. And then she leaves and he can get out of bed and get dressed because he's been hiding under the covers during this whole conversation. And then he has a great day around the castle. Again, he's hanging out with these 2 women, the one very ugly, the one very fair. But the castle itself is a delight. And he has a wonderful time in the castle until the Lord comes back from his hunting. And the Lord has all this venison, all this meat and hides, and he throws them in front of Gawain and says, I have given you this. This is your winnings for the day. And Gawain, he says, well, these are what I have won. Here are your winnings. And he kisses him. He smooches the lord of the castle and gives him a kiss. And the lord of the castle goes, oh, I think you've had a better day than I have. Where did you get that from? And Gawain says, that's not part of the deal. We didn't have to say where we got our winnings from. This is what I won, and I give it to you freely.
And he says nothing more. That's it. They are even. And I love this. Mine uses the phrase juggled words. So between him and the lady, they juggle words back and forth. Between him and the Lord, they juggle these words. It's funny that that's okay. Because Gawain is honest about it. He's like, full payment. Nothing else happened. And so they're just on the same page.
Yeah.
Strange.
It just works.
And then there's another day and they go after...
Yeah, the Lord thinks this is so great. That was so much fun. Let's do it again. And so they agree that on the second day it's going to happen again.
Bizarre. I think the whole thing is bizarre. On the second day, there was this dangerous boar, a wild boar. And man, the descriptions of the boar are good, where nothing can hurt this thing. It's so tough. It's so ancient. It's from the hills and the old times. But the lord of the castle is the one.
Yes.
He draws his sword and finally takes it down.
And he cuts off the head and bears it to Gawain, and this is his winnings for the day. Meanwhile, the lady has been much more forceful on day 2. Much like the boar, this aggressive wild animal, the lady is much more aggressive on day 2. But Gawain continues to employ his masterful use of words, his courtly banter, and day 2 ends where he gets 2 kisses from the lady, which when the Lord comes home, he immediately gives his winnings to the Lord again. And the Lord thinks this is awesome. Let's do it again.
One more time.
Now, Gawain at this point is starting to worry. He says, I really should make sure I can go to the chapel. And the guy's like, nope, don't worry about it. You've got one more day. I promise you. I'll send you a servant to guide you. You'll be fine. Let's do this for day 3. And then day 3 comes.
And day 3, they go after a fox, which is an interesting third day. Like, you'd think it'd get higher in complexity, but all these hunters go after one fox. They bring home a fox's tail. And a fox, I mean, kind of throughout history, deceptive, right? There's some kind of trickery to a fox. They bring home a fox's tail.
Yeah, and clever, smarter.
Mm-hmm.
So with the deer, the hunt wasn't that hard. They just had to go do it. The boar, they required tremendous courage, right? I mean, it was a violent animal, but they knew where the boar was. It didn't exactly hide. The fox requires all this cleverness. It's tricky. It's slippery. And in many ways, again, this parallels what the lady is doing on day 3, because she is tricky. And there's some additional things that happen on day 3 that are very important. One, the normal rising of the kisses increases. So day 1, 1 kiss, day 2, 2 kisses, day 3, 3 kisses. Again, this book is so well orchestrated that there's these patterns that flow within it. But eventually the lady switches tactics and states, well, you obviously don't love me. Won't you give me a gift? She starts asking for a gift. And again, Gawain is really in a tight spot here because he's got nothing to give, but he's able to do this in a courteous manner. Basically saying, look, I came on this task expecting to die. I did not bring baggage with me. I did not bring jewels. I will not insult you with giving you, my work gloves. You deserve so much more than that. And so he's able to pass this off in a better way. Well, the lady then says, well, let me give you a gift. And again, Gawain spars with this and says, no, I can't accept. That's too much. She offers him a ring, this gorgeous, beautiful ring. And he says, no. But then she says, well, okay, if you won't accept that, take this much lesser thing, this green girdle, which he unties around herself. Now, the word girdle, let's talk about this. When we think of a girdle, we think of something from, 100 years ago, more like a corset. This, though, can be a belt, a sash, a girdle. All these terms get used interchangeably. So think about it as basically a long cloth that can look almost like a scarf that can be wrapped around and tied around you.
A green silk scarf, and this one is worn around the waist.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells Gawain here, because he has refused everything else from her. See how small it is and how slight, but whoever knows what's woven in its threads would value it rather more, I suppose. For any man bound with this belt, this green lace locked round him can never be killed, here under God's own heaven. No blow, no trick, nothing can hurt him.
Well, that would be convenient for a man who's about to have his head cut off, huh?
He has said no and said no and said no, but here, it's funny that love or lust and power, wealth, none of that made Gawain stumble. But this fear of death, he accepts this gift from her. And they agree, this will be our secret. This is not part of the deal with the Lord of the Castle. You keep it.
Yeah, that is a fascinating point. Much like some of the earlier things where I said we could just sit and think about this for a while, there is so much about this temptation scene in the castle that's worth thinking about. The obvious one that if you're going to think about this for any length of time, you have to come to terms with. What was Gawain going to give the Lord of the Castle if the lady succeeded in seducing him? Yeah. We'll just move on past that one. But it brings us to the next point, because, again, when he first takes the girdle, the natural response is, well, he's just going to give that to the Lord of the Manor anyway. So it doesn't really matter if he accepts it or not. Why? No big deal. But then immediately, she makes him promise that he won't tell her lord about it. So now we have conflicting oaths. Gawain has promised to give everything he receives, everything he wins, everything he earns, but he's now also promised to not do that. And so we have conflicting oaths where he cannot keep them both. What is the right thing for him to do? Is it to break the oath to the lady? Is it to break the oath to the lord of the manor? And then how does his fear of his impending death factor into this? And again, I think extensive conversations could be held on this, and I think it could be approached from a lot of different angles. And I'm not here to tell you what the right angle is because I don't know, but I think it's really interesting to think about.
Well, he seems to know what to do. It says he hid her love gift in a safe place, covered it carefully, and then he went and confessed. And he left so happy. He is cleansed. He is absolved. I do not get the sense that he confessed about the green scarf.
Yeah, I don't think so either. He does give the lord of the castle the 3 kisses that he promised he would, but yeah, he does not tell him about the girdle, and now it's the day. And this takes us into book 4, the final book.
And it describes Gawain going to bed, and it says, basically, I don't know if he slept or not, but we're going to let him rest for now. Very much like a play. Like, let him rest. We'll come back to him tomorrow.
That's right.
And in the morning, he is not asleep. It says that his eyelids were closed, but he slept little. And each cock crow told him what hour had come. So he is up and out the door early. And he will show up. He did give his word to the Green Knight. And this one he is upholding.
He's accompanied by one servant from the Lord's castle. He promised him he'd give him a guide. And the guide won't go all the way. And as they approach what is going to be the Green Chapel, the guide tells him, look, you don't understand, Sir Gawain. You are going to die. The knight down there is a monster. He kills everyone who comes this way. He's got this massive club. He's terrifying. You can't go down there. Just leave. I won't tell anyone. I won't tell anyone you didn't go. But Gawain is not willing to take that easy out.
Which is so interesting because he just did. With the lady, he says, this will be our secret. He agrees to it. She won't tell anybody, their secret kept forever. This servant is willing to do the same for him. And he says, no.
Yeah.
He says, no.
Which brings the question, does Gawain really believe that girdle is going to save him or not? Because there's reasons to believe both. So if he doesn't believe that girdle is going to save him, then what he's doing can be painted as admirable. He's maintaining his oath to the lady as a preference to his oath to the lord of the manor. But if he believes that girdle is going to save him, and that's why he kept it, that is a violation of his honor. Because it's not for honor of the lady and the oath to her, it's for his own personal survival. And this is the wonderful complexity of this, is we don't really have an answer. But here we do see an act of what I would think would be tremendous courage, where he says, I'm going to go down. Unless, of course, he's got 100% confidence in that girdle, in which case he's just going now down because he knows he can't be harmed. So these are the give and take on this. That is so wonderful. The chapel itself is not even a chapel. It's more like an earth structure, like a barrow or a mound. And so he describes it as a place that the devil would hold religious services at. So it's terrifying. The servant won't go any farther, but Gawain does. And he goes down and he calls out to meet the knight who should be there waiting for him.
And I do not believe he thinks that girdle will save him, because he's weeping, in essence. He says, God's will be done. Alas, alas, what good is wailing? It never helps. I'll never gasp, though my life be severed.
So in this case, then, is he noble or not? Because if he doesn't believe the girdle will save him, this may be him keeping an oath to a lady. So I just love this. I love the back and forth on this.
So the descriptions of the mound and the surrounding area are great, because he can hear someone there, but he calls out, basically says, I'm here. And the green man responds. He says, you came. I can trust you now.
Oh, yeah. And the green man arrives, and he's got a different axe. The green one is still back in Camelot. It's over the fireplace, and they're all admiring it. But he's got a new one, and he is there ready to finally take his stroke. And you said you had forgotten how this all ended?
Yeah.
So you were wondering what was going to happen now.
You'd said something cool comes out of this. Like, I don't remember that at all. So it is a tense moment for Gawain. And he says, keep to the bargain. Swing just once. I will stand still, and you'll do exactly as you please. And Gawain bent his neck, leaned forward. His white flesh gleamed. He tried to seem fearless, but his knees were weak.
And as this great monster of a green knight swings the axe high in the air, Gawain's shoulders shrugged. So he didn't back away. He's still there, but his shoulders in fear shrugged.
He flinched.
Yeah. And so this is another thing that makes me think he can't have had that much faith in the girdle. Because if he really believed in it, why would he flinch? But he's man. He's human. He has frailty. He has fear. He has weakness. And so he flinches. And the knight mid-stroke stops. He pulls the stroke back and says, "Are you Gawain? Are you really a knight of Arthur's table that you flinch? I didn't flinch when you took your stroke on me." And Gawain's response to this is wonderful.
It is really good. Gawain says, "I flinched. I won't again. And this much is plain. My head, if it falls, won't talk in my hands." The Green Knight had a trick. He knew he was safe. Gawain does not know that he is safe.
Yeah, it took no courage for the Green Knight to do what he did. This takes tremendous courage for Gawain to do what he did. So we have this first stroke that gets stopped midway because of the flinch of Gawain. And he says, "Do it again." And so the knight goes to do it again. And he does this mock, like, half stroke. Gawain is thinking he's going to die, but the knight pulls back again. So there's now 2 strokes he's given. And on this second stroke, he says, "You held true that time. You didn't move. Now I know I can really do this." And Gawain just yells at him and says, "Get on with it."
He does. "You talk too long.
Yeah.
Get it over with."
Says, "I think you're starting to get scared about this." I mean, he talks some sass back to this guy. And the Green Knight is now going to do this in earnest. And so this monster raises this mighty axe and he brings it through the full force of the stroke and he nicks Gawain on the neck. He does not sever his head, just a minor wound. It's bloody. He wounds him. He nicks him. But the axe passes through and Gawain springs up. "I have withstood the blow. I was here." And now Gawain is in armor and now he is ready to fight, to return any blow that the knight should give him now because he has met his requirement.
The Green Knight responds, interesting response, I think, where it says he's leaning on his axe now. Like, Gawain's ready for a fight. He's still alive and he's going to go. And the knight, he's leaning on his axe and says, "I owed you a stroke. I've paid you a stroke. I release you from any and all obligations. Game's over." What?
Yeah. And again, this is all done in poetry, and so I'm summarizing beautiful words here. But this is where we learn the twist. We learn the secret. He goes into more detail about actually the 3 strokes he just gave Gawain. He says, "I owed you one for that first one a year ago." That was actually done the first time he swung the axe. The one where Gawain shrugged, that was a stroke. And if the knight chose to stop the swing, I think technically that should have fulfilled the terms of the bargain. So what are the other 2? One is just Gawain's bravery, but the other is, he says, "For the 3 days you spent in my castle." The Green Knight is Lord Bertilac. We know his name now, and he was this man that loved Gawain and entertained him in his castle. And he says, "It was I that had my wife try to seduce you as a testing for you." So the first stroke, 1, fulfilled the terms of the original agreement, but also you were honest with me about that first kiss, so I owed you no damage. Day 2, I owed you no damage for the second stroke because you gave me the 2 kisses. And day 3, you deserve some wound from me because you did not tell me about my wife's girdle. But he lets him off the hook and says, "But I don't really blame you for that because I know you were scared for your life, so that's okay. That's why I nicked you on the neck." What?
Yeah.
That's just crazy.
He tells him, "I know everything you did and didn't do, and that not many better men have walked this earth, been worth as much, and you are like a pearl to a pea compared to other knights." Apparently, this is a test that he has set for others, and they didn't pay him back in kind, and they mistook where they shouldn't have. They did not uphold what they said they believed, how they said that they would live. But you failed a little, lost good faith, not for a beautiful belt or in lust, but for love of your life. I can hardly blame you. But Gawain, he went from all fired up and ready to fight, and now he feels shame because he feels the burden of that sin. He did make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the right choice after he'd accepted the belt? I don't know. That's a tough one. Where he made the mistake, that was the point that he lost good faith, that he earned that nick on the neck, that judgment.
And I'm going to talk a little bit about Gawain's response here in a moment, but before we do, we learned something else from Sir Bertilac. The lord of that castle was not particularly magical. He was just this lord of a castle and a great man. So how did this whole Green Knight thing come about? How did the head severing and coming back come about? He tells us, Morgan Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay, the great mistress of magic in the Arthurian legend. She was the one that sent him to Arthur's court because of her hatred for Guinevere.
All this was just a fight between two royal women?
Her hope was, her plan was that this would scare Guinevere to death. That's what she wanted to do. How ridiculous is that? And at the same time, how kind of awesome? I mean, it's just what?
It's 4D chess right there.
Totally. But Arthur and Gawain were too noble. They were able to tone down the fear and soothe Guinevere. So then the question is, well, why did this even keep going then after that, if that was the whole goal? It's just so fun to think about and think through. And so, yeah, Morgan Le Fay. But back to Gawain. Yeah, you're right. He is shriven to the soul with this. He is a broken man because he believes that he has lost everything. The best description I can give is, it's like a broken pane of glass, right? When glass breaks, the whole thing breaks. And I think this is the way Gawain is thinking. He has lost his honor in one point, and so to him, that means he has lost his honor in all points. That's not what Sir Bertilac is saying, though. Sir Bertilac is saying, yeah, that was a screw-up, but it was a little one. You're great in every other way. But Gawain is brittle here, and his psyche just can't handle it. And so he refuses any other hospitality from the Lord, and he is going to go back to Camelot, not to brag about what he has done, not to say, hey, here I am alive, but to confess his sin to them and his error to them. And in doing so, he ties this girdle about him. Says he ties it in a knot under his left arm, the left side, the side of evil, the side of sin, so that people know this is a confession of the act he did. So he returns to Camelot in his own eyes in disgrace and in a state of penitence.
I actually think it also serves as a symbol of, he talks about a symbol of the weakness and error of this feeble flesh, how easily infected with the filth of sin. And it says, if ever he's prideful, this will help him remember humility. And I don't think it's just his own. He, in good faith, was at this castle and he was treated very well, very hospitably. But this woman is described by her husband. You can make her your friend who was once your bitter foe. So I do think there is some fractured trust there in other people's goodness, other people's integrity. Not everybody's going to play the game with chivalry, with courage, with honesty, man or woman. Mm-hmm. And here he got played.
Yeah.
He was complicit in this cheat with this belt. But again, he didn't believe it was going to work anyway, or he wouldn't have flinched.
Yeah, I don't think so. There's debate about that, but I agree with you.
For how upset he is going into it and the prospect of losing his life, I too think Gawain went into it earnestly, willing to lose his life. Yeah. And that's such a part of what these knights do in the ideal of Arthur's court. They play with death, their own death personally. And his is worse because he had to wait a year. Yeah. You think he didn't think about that every day? 100 days left, 50 days left. Like there would be a countdown.
Oh, totally. Totally. But as we've spoken about in other stories, there are some things worse than death, and certainly in Gawain's mind. The problem is one of the things worse than death for him is dishonor. And so now he feels he has achieved dishonor.
It's sad, though, when he gets back to Camelot, the knights laugh at him. I thought that was a little unkind.
That's interesting. I didn't take that in a sad way. I took that in a supportive way.
Mine said the king consoled him and all that court, and they laughed, and resolved then and there that lords and ladies of Arthur's table would each of them wear a slanted belt around their waists, woven of green, to keep company with their well-loved Gawain.
Yeah, I took that as a laughter and solidarity, that he was taking himself too seriously. Kind of like Lord Bertilac was trying to explain to him, no, you screwed up, but you're also great. To me, this was them trying to crack through that almost just self-centered self-mortification, that he was making too big a deal out of this. And the only way they could get through that was to, one, laugh at it, and two, to enter into solidarity with him, where if you're disgraced, we're all disgraced, but we don't really think this is a disgrace and you shouldn't either. It was the way I always read it.
Yeah. Well, the Green Knight does absolve him. It says, "You stand confessed so clean. You took such plain penance at the point of my axe." We're square. We are even.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, Gawain walks away from this with this reminder of error and humility.
Such a good story. So much fun. And again, we tore through this, but there is so much else that can be talked about, thought about, and then a lot of those questions that don't really have an answer. How fun are those to debate? I mean, just such a great story. But in the manuscript that this was recorded in, there was another line that added to end this. And this line was added by a different hand, is my understanding, and probably was written quite a bit later than the original poem. Unfortunately, it's written in French, which means I'm not even going to try it. But Jody is ready.
All right. Stephen has thrown himself at many Scottish accent things boldly, so I will attempt my French here. I'm sorry to actual French-speaking peoples. On y soit qui mal y pense.
Yes.
Mine says, "Shame to him who finds evil here."
Yeah, I've read several versions of the translation. Evil be to him who thinks evil of this, or shamed be the person who thinks evil of it. This line got put in after this sash, this garter, this belt got tied around them. And this speaks to that idea that if you think this is really evil, that these people are wearing this, evil to you. Shame on you. This says more about you than it does about those of us wearing it in solidarity with this good knight. And so it's a wonderful ending, a great line to finish on, but this has its own history. This is actually the motto of the Order of the Green Garter. The Order of the Green Garter is the highest level of knighthood in England. This was founded by King Edward III in 1348 as the most senior order of knighthood. So it is outranked only in precedence, as I understand it, by the Victoria Cross and the George Cross. And so this is up there. The Order of the Garter includes the sovereign, whoever is ruling the kingdom, the Prince of Wales, so the Crown Prince, and then no more than 24 living members at any given time. So this is an incredibly elite order. And their symbol is a garter. And it is tied into this line and has some ties into this story, which is just incredibly cool and I think awesome. I don't think in my brief research into this that it's a direct link, though. I think this probably came from something else, because actually what they wear is usually blue, not green. But I do think they took components of this story, and certainly that last line is part of it.
I took this last line because some say who find ill in this or ill related to this. When we're wondering about the motivation of Arthur, of Gawain, or even of the knights laughing when he comes back, I've read some essays that think, yeah, they're laughing kind of down at him, like, you silly boy, you're taking this too serious. Like, there's mockery there, but you don't have to take it that way. It could be that other way as well, where, like, they just love him. And you're like, you know what? We're on board with you. There's other examples in this where what spurred Gawain to take on this challenge instead of Arthur? He's the only one who spoke up in this telling. It's love. Right? What evil could we find in that? Gawain loved his king and said, no, let me take this. Let me take on this risk, this challenge. And even the back and forth with the lord of the castle and these silly games, if someone is truly living the way that they say they feel, say they believe, say that they ought to, if he's truly looking at the image of Mary, the Queen of Heaven, to increase his faith and his courage, well, maybe we could read this in a positive way and look toward that ideal. So I kind of took this at the end where if you think there's evil here, shame on you.
Shame on you.
And part of that, I think, is the wording. Because some of it is phrased funny. Like it is this speaking down to someone. But no, it is Gawain trying to live with integrity. And
Gawain is awesome. Certainly in this story.
All right, so I'll try it one more time since you weren't expecting it before. Here we go. On y soit qui mal y pense.
And with that, we'll turn the page, and we hope you join us for the next chapter.